Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Dave.
And join us every Thursday for a new episode of Two Player Bros, a podcast about two guys who play way too many video games. Join me and Dave as we talk about the latest in Xbox, PlayStation, PC, and VR news, previews, and reviews. We have it all, and we play it all.
And join us every other week for Post Game, where we play through and dive deep into our favorite modern classics and new releases.
That's Two Player Bros, available every Thursday wherever you get your podcast, part of the Forgotten Entertainment family.
Forgotten Cinema is getting romantic for our 8th season and just in time for Valentine's Day as we cover the 90s ensemble drama, Beautiful Girls.
We'll then do a complete 180 as we dive into some spy films, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and Spy Game.
We'll find out why White Men Can't Jump and whether you should shoot to kill while enjoying a Frankenweenie. Nope, that doesn't make any sense.
You know what else doesn't make sense? This season will also feature our 100th episode of Forgotten Cinema.
Feels like 100 years.
Don't I know it?
Forgotten Cinema. Never stop, never stopping. Yes, that's a hint. Part of the Forgotten Entertainment family.
Hello there. I'm Colleen.
I'm Anders.
And I'm Daniel. We're three nerds who met through our love of science fiction and fantasy storytelling. Of course, one of our favorites is George Lucas's signature achievement, Star Wars.
And if there's one thing the internet definitely doesn't have enough of, it's nerds talking about Star Wars. So here we are with yet another Star Wars podcast, where every week we journey to a galaxy far, far away to discuss one of the films in the current Star Wars canon.
We'll talk about how our relationship with the film has changed over time, how the film builds on what came before it, and forms our understanding of the Force. Finally, we'll provide you with some recommendations for other material you may enjoy if you love these movies.
This week, we are journeying to Endor in order to recognize the one true God, C-3PO. Colleen, Anders, you guys ready for the banquet in his honor?
Yeah, as long as we're not the main course.
Will there be magic?
Well, Anders, why don't you get us started with some numbers and we'll see if there is some magic there.
Sure thing. All right, so Return of the Jedi premiered on May 25th, 1983. Now, somewhat famously, the title was changed at the last minute. It was originally called Revenge of the Jedi, but then George Lucas decided that Jedi do not, in fact, take revenge, so they changed it. There are a lot of marketing materials out there where there are some serious collector's item with that original title. This movie was then re-released in 1985, and then, along with the other two films in the trilogy, remastered and re-released in 1997 as the special edition. This movie, on a budget of about $32.5 million, so right about the same as Empire Strikes Back, made $475.3 million worldwide on its initial theatrical run. And it was the very first movie ever to gross over $20 million in its opening weekend.
Boom.
Wow.
This movie was written by Lawrence Kasdan and George Lucas from a story by George Lucas and directed by Richard Marquand. So another one that George Lucas did not, in fact, direct.
Nope. But that's okay.
That's all right.
All right. Now we're going to get into our reactions and discussion. Daniel, last episode you mentioned how you've been able to avoid the special editions up until now. So with this last one, tell us what your experience was like.
Okay, so now that I've seen all three special edition movies, my brother made way bigger of a deal about avoiding them than we needed to. It's not that big of a deal. I can handle watching the special editions. I do have a little bit of a gripe with this edition because they changed the musical number in Jabba's palace. I will say the music is better in the special edition, but those CGI like dancers and singers that they added in, I'm not feeling it. Not at all. Though I do love Boba flirting with the dancers. I thought that was fantastic.
Get it.
I was
Boba.
Like, that's perfect. I love that for him. Overall, special editions, I'll give them a pass. They made things look really good, especially the space battles. I love the changes there. So I will probably keep watching the special editions. But if I need to, I still have a way to watch the theatricals, so we're all good.
Yeah, this movie, another one that I'm mostly okay with the updates they made for the special editions. You mentioned the CGI on the band. Not the best. 1997, not the best. They didn't exactly clean that up like they have since with the original Jabba the Hutt in A New Hope. They've cleaned him up over the years. They haven't done that with those guys. And the only thing I'd really rather remove is Vader's second no in that final showdown with the Emperor. The first one where it's like low and you can tell he's stealing himself and he's like, no. That's fine. That works.
Mhm.
The second one though is just over the top and too much of a drama queen even for Vader.
Yeah.
And the thing that I definitely prefer in these special editions, I know there's a movement out there that wants justice for Yub-Nub, but John Williams strikes again with that new score over the ending. I love it. I love that music. And I love seeing all the planets that we've gotten to know over the course of the entire series. It's amazing.
Actually, hold on. I do have a gripe there as well.
Okay.
I did not need to see the Gungans celebrating here in a no, we
At
don't
Sheev's
need
Lake
that.
home?
Yeah, we don't need that.
Seeing Naboo.
Okay, it was nice seeing Naboo. It's just like I have a distaste for the Gungans. Give us Darth Jar Jar, but that's another story.
Yeah, and then the addition of Hayden Christensen in the end, subbing him in instead of Sebastian Shaw, I'm kind of 50-50 on. Like, I mean, if you really want to do it, sure, fine. I did see something recently actually that said Hayden Christensen did not know what they were shooting when he shot that. Like George Lucas just kind of gave him the robes. It was like, hey, put these on and let's get some footage of you looking at the camera, which is why his facial expressions don't necessarily match what's going on.
George
He looks a
strikes
little
again.
embarrassed.
Yeah.
Confused a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
what's going on?
And I'm also just confused. Like, if you're going to have the younger Anakin, why is he wearing those like brown white robes? Anakin never freaking wore those as a young
Thank
Jedi. He had the darker tone robes the entire time, all through the prequels. Why?
Give Anakin his emo robes or don't change it at all.
Exactly.
Right? What's the point? Oh man, I'm the same on those changes. It's not terrible, but I like the originals just fine too. I cannot stand the upgrades, quote unquote upgrades to the Jabba palace and barge scenes. Just like, no, I despise Sice Noodles from Clone Wars. Like, no, Zero the Hutt should have killed her instead. And I hate Zero the Hutt also. So that really puts us where we are right there. It's just like, no, the song was bad. The CGI was cheesy. And it made that kind of scare factor go away. Because Jabba's scary. Like, he's feeding people to the
Yes.
Rancor. He's a terrifying person. And then you have this like girl group with the lead singer who can't really sing, and it was just too much cheese factor. And I wish they hadn't messed with the Sarlacc. I didn't need a huge mouth coming out of it like a octopus thing. I didn't need that. Like, it's fine. Just dump
It's
them in
not
the pit.
as scary anymore.
It's not. It's much scarier if it's just lazing about there. I mean, it's like basically a stomach that's just dissolving people. I don't think it really needed the mouth.
Exactly.
But I think it was also one thing I thought that was interesting about that, though, and this gets a little bit towards some stuff in The Mandalorian. I didn't really realize when I was a kid that the monster is in the pit. It's not that the monster is the pit. So the beak actually kind of helps me understand that it is something inside this pit. Despite the fact that they do actually overtly say they distinguish between the pit and the monster in the movie.
Well,
But
for
as
a
a
kid,
kid,
I mean,
if you're
yeah.
a kid, you don't recognize that sort
You're
of
not
thing.
listening to that. I do miss Yub Nub, otherwise that's about it.
All right, so let's get a little bit into our relationship with this film and how it's kind of changed over time. I gotta say, my opinion of this film in terms of my rankings and things hasn't really shifted that much. But it wasn't until this particular rewatch that I did actually notice how silly this movie is. Everyone kind of always calls it the silly one or the one with all the Muppets or whatever, however you want to say it. And I never really picked up on that until now. And I do think that specifically this film is where the Stormtroopers' reputations start to take a dive. They are bumbling idiots in this one. During that whole final battle on Endor, they barely fire a shot. It's not even that they're missing point blank when they do. They barely fire a shot when these creatures are just like jumping all over the place.
They're running away from teddy bears.
Hey, teddy bears are freaky, man.
Well, they can be, especially if one's running after you.
With a spear.
With a spear, yeah.
I mean, but you have a blaster, sir.
This is true.
Yeah. Hey, wait, idiots. We all have blasters. Right.
And vehicles and
Colleen,
artillery.
this one is not Space Aladdin, all right?
This one is not. No, we're going to get to that later. Oh, man. Yeah, this is the least favorite of mine of the original trilogy. It doesn't mean it's bad. I still like it. It's just not as good as the other two. The biggest gripe I have is the Obi-Wan and Luke scene. Like, as an adult watching it, I'm like, much about this is not okay. It plays so differently for me now. Terrible choice not to tell Luke about his family. Like, hasn't old Ben learned anything from anything that's happened in Star Wars?
If he
To be
had,
fair-
maybe he wouldn't be a ghost.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
What's up, Obi-Wan? But to be fair, Lucas didn't know that he was going to make Vader into Anakin Skywalker until later, so they had to put in this scene to explain Obi-Wan's creative definition of the truth. Otherwise, we'd be like, well, Obi-Wan's a liar. How can we trust anything he says? I do like that it makes Obi-Wan a more well-rounded character, like someone who does make mistakes.
Mhm.
But when he basically tells Luke he has to murk his dad, that's another tough look. He doesn't say it outright. He says, "You must face Darth Vader again." And Luke's like, "But wait, I can't kill my dad." And Obi-Wan answers, quote, "Then the Emperor has already won." Like, he's sad about it. Like, old Ben, no.
Yep.
If Luke kills his dad, he will fall to the dark side and probably become Palpatine's new apprentice. Isn't that what we're trying to avoid? Maybe a better dialogue choice would have been like, "Did I say kill?" No, I just said you have to face him, not kill him. Like, maybe just a light maiming that happens.
Yeah, like I did to him on Mustafar all those years ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say
just a light maiming.
What does he have left to maim?
Exactly. Well, guess he could cut off his head, but then he'd be dead. So we're gonna have to walk that one back again, Obi-Wan. I do like that Luke basically schools Obi-Wan in this conversation. Like every 5 seconds, he's throwing stuff back at him. Like, good job, Luke. Keep asking questions. Your sister will remain anonymous forever. Oh, it's Leia. Well done, Obi-Wan, once again. How about you, Daniel?
So I agree. I like that Obi-Wan becomes a more well-rounded character. You see some of his flaws there. Very much, the students learn from the flaws of the masters and try and move past them, but it makes them all much more human. Like, they're striving to be this better, more luminous being, but they're still humans. They still get stuck in the mud sometimes. So I like that no one is really perfect, and that we kind of see a continuation of that in Luke later on. That's for another series. As for the you basically have to kill your dad conversation, for all my Avatar fans, it reminds me of the Aang having to kill the Fire Lord conversations that he has.
Kyoshi, just kill him.
You just gotta kill him and then finding your own way. So I like that a lot.
Would he have found his own way if Ben had spelled it out for him?
Well, he didn't know. I mean, at that point, Ben had lost all faith in Vader. He's like, he's screwed, man. I mean, he fell to the dark side. It's over.
I like Luke being challenged in that moment and having stand up for what he believes in. It's nice to see that Luke has grown from this little farm boy in episode 4 who was just doing whatever Obi-Wan says. And he's like, "Oh, that's my idol." And now he's like, "Well, no, I look up to you, but I'm going to make my own journey. I'm my own man. I'm my own Jedi." So seeing Luke's growth is amazing. And the Luke Vader plot is my favorite part of this movie. That is what always stands out to me and what I always think of when I think of this movie. But I have to change my assertion from the beginning of the podcast that 4 is my least favorite of the trilogy. This is my least favorite of the trilogy. And like you said, Colleen, doesn't mean it's bad. Still absolutely love this movie. But it is so goofy whenever we're on Endor, and Tatooine feels a bit goofy. But then everything to do with Luke and Vader is deadly serious. And so the tone feels so mismatched. So that kind of, detracts a little bit from me. But I still, like I said, absolutely love this movie. And Anders, I do agree. The Stormtroopers letting the Ewoks overtake them, that really is the start of like, oh, Stormtroopers are the worst. And because they were intimidating in 4 and 5. And now we see a little bit more goofy side. So it is probably the one I'm going to rewatch the least, but still love it.
Yeah, I mean, they just... It's a very common fantasy movie trope where you realize that there's more of them in terms of the Ewoks, and they can kind of overwhelm the evil bad guys. That's totally a valid plot thing, but the Stormtroopers just go from 60 to 0.
Yeah.
Really easily. Even with Rex there. I mean, that probably wouldn't have happened. Shouts to our boy, Clone Trooper Rex. All now and forever.
All right, so now we get into where we actually get to shout out some of our favorite little details in this film, starting with the ships. Now, Empire Strikes Back, we talked about how it gave us a much clearer look at the Imperial Navy. This one gets us a much clearer look at the Rebellion's fleet. So, Colleen, can you give us a little bit of background on those Mon Cala ships?
Heck yes, Mon Calamari forever. I love the Mon Cala cruisers. It's just so fun. The Emperor made a huge mistake by subjugating Mon Cala because it motivated the people to kind of throw all of their weight behind the Rebel Alliance. The ships were originally built to be city ships. So they're really big. These are the big bulk cruisers. But the Imperial occupation forced the Mon Cal to modify the ships into combat-ready vessels. Just more mistakes from the Empire right here. And then Admiral Akbar's ship, which is the one we see the most of in this movie, is called Home One. Like, my dude just has the best ship. This is an MC-80A Star Cruiser, and it is a monster. Like, you do not want to mess with the Mon Calamari when their fleet comes in. Like, no. Even in Legends moving forward, everybody is still like, can we not engage the Mon Calamari?
Oh, yeah. The armor plating on those ships is insane.
Yeah, don't mess with the squid people. Just don't do it. I also want to shout out that Y-Wing that we see that joins the Falcon and Wedge's X-Wing into the Death Star too. This is flown by Nora Wexley. We'll find that out later. And the Y-Wing draws a lot of the TIE fighters away from Lando and Wedge so that they can kind of blow the station. And she lives, so good for her. Good job, Nora. She did not die in the Death Star 2 explosion.
No, can't
good.
say the same
I don't
for
need
her
another
son
death for me to be sad.
in other movies, but
can we not talk about Snap yet? Greg Grunberg deserves our respect.
I was just trying to say that, I'm glad we don't have someone else for me to be sad about, but there we go.
Oh no, don't worry. Don't worry. It's coming, Daniel. Don't worry.
It's coming. Oh yeah. So like you said, Colleen, the Mon Cal cruisers are a favorite of mine. They're just fantastic. I played a lot of Battlefront 2, the 2005 version, and you could do all these space battles. And so you would have Rebel against Empire, and you would spawn on these cruisers. And so it was just, as a little kid, seeing those giant space battles happening, it was like the best thing that I could ever do. And so the Mon Cal cruisers are amazing. But I also have to say the B-Wing is so cool. I think this is our first look on seeing the B-Wings.
I think so, yeah.
Like the long blade looking ships. Yeah, I love those things.
Those are really, really cool. Designed by another Mon Cala.
Oh, there we
Shouts
go.
to
Did not
Rory.
know that.
Yes, Rory. So, we've talked about the Mon Calamari. Let's talk about any of our other favorite aliens from this. And again, one of the things I really noticed on this rewatch, I'm pretty sure now whenever they're writing a new Star Wars story and they have to come up with a new alien race, they just go back to the Jabba the Hutt palace scenes, look in the background, and they're like, all right, who is in here that we haven't actually haven't talked about yet? But I did notice, all right, anyone of you guys who listens to Bohemian Geek Studies know I can never resist shouting out my guy, Hondo Onaka. There are Weequay at Jabba's palace. One of them is actually the drummer for the band. So Space Pirates,
Fantastic.
Yes. Give me a Hondo show.
Yeah, cowards.
I will always love seeing Weequay. I have to talk about Salacious B. Crumb. So the fact that Salacious B. Crumb, one, has that name, which is just amazing. He is the weird little monkey lizard that sits with Jabba and just laughs at everything, like the little jerk he is. So he is a Kowakian monkey lizard, and he is Jabba's jester. You know what? I'm glad he went down with the
laughing at
ship.
your own jokes.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's the worst, and I love him.
See, I don't like him being the jester. I like the idea that Jabba the Hutt has it's like almost like a Dr. Evil kitty cat that he's constantly petting.
He's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, he's not completely like sentient, I don't think. I mean, he is, but he's not quite as like a jester would be. Like a good mix, like you said, Daniel. And unfortunately, Daniel, I got to do it too again. My creature shout out is the Rancor. That's right. The Rancor has a story, and her name is Patissa.
No.
Sorry, Daniel. I've seen her referred to as either male or female on certain places, but we're just going to stick with a lady because that's just so much sadder. And despite being carnivores, Rancors were actually peaceful creatures, like pretty benign. The Dathomir and Night Sisters actually domesticated them. I love it so much. But Jabba, because he's a dick, kept Patissa half starved so that she would eat anything that fell into that pit there. And I have a real irrational fear of being eaten, but I can't help but feel bad for Patissa and for her Beastmaster guy, Makakili, who's crying.
Okay, as a kid, 6 years old, watching that scene, you'd think I would be like, oh no, Luke, he's about to get eaten by this monster. No, I felt so sad when she's dead and her Beastmaster comes running over and he's crying. And I'm like, yeah, man, I would cry too. Your amazing monster just got murdered.
They were going to escape together.
Every week you do this to me.
Okay, Daniel, everything's fine.
Oh,
Oh, God.
oh gosh.
All right, Daniel. Well, once you kind of pull yourself back together, let's move into
Grind
our
to
unbearables, untouchables. So, what in this movie really was perfect, and what for you just didn't work?
So, as I said, the Luke Vader plot is just A+ Star Wars to me. The throne room scenes are thrilling. It's some of the heights of what I think Star Wars can be, and then the space battle around the Death Star just looks fantastic. I love anything to do with space battles. So those are my standout, like untouchable A+ Star Wars. What I will have to say is the unbearable. I'm so sorry, Ewoks. You're
Unbearable.
cute. You're adorable, but you should not have been there. It was
Eat your mama.
supposed to be the Wookiees, and that would have made much more sense to me that Sheev's best troops, as he says, because I'm going to station a garrison of my best troops, and they got taken out by Ewoks? Like, if it had been a horde of Wookiees, I get it. But your best troops taken out by teddy bears with wooden spears? Come on, man. That's a little goofy. The second Death Star, I thought before that it used to be a little bit lazy, but then real world, like, oh, this went wrong, let's try it again, is a very normal thing to happen. So I'm like, you know what? I'll let it run.
If you're going to spend money on one, you might as well spend money on two.
Yeah, we already made the plans.
So, yeah, I thought I was going to have to defend this decision to you guys. Like, I understand criticisms of people saying, are we just doing this same thing again? Yes, I get that. But, Daniel, like you said, this is how this works in real life. Number one, this is how innovation works. You never start with the prototype, or you never settle with the prototype. The prototype is the MVP, minimum viable product, and then you innovate and iterate on top of that to make it better so that the second model is better. That's the plan always from the beginning. Also, generally how militaries work, if you destroy my big gun, I build a bigger gun.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I do have some questions about escalation. I do have some questions about the timeline of the building. They kind of threw that together really fast. You got to assume that they worked out every single possible last kink in the construction and design from the first Death Star, which took almost 20 years, if not longer, to build. And this one, when it was fully operational, is 4 times larger.
So I think to that point, they were trying to do a lot of that in secret before when they were building the first one. And this one, they were like, hey, everyone knows about it. Let's just make it. Let's just make it out in the open. I will say, I really hope they went over Project Stardust and found the mistake that Galen Erso put in, because if they just rebuilt it the entire same specs but scaled up 4 times bigger, that would be a huge mistake.
That would explain how they didn't have to fire torpedoes into the hole. They just flew into it themselves.
Exactly. But I mean, they're also mid-build, so.
Yeah, they were mid-build. But my untouchables for this movie, I really realized, yes, this movie is silly. Fine. But this movie is a showcase for Anthony Daniels. He is so good in this movie.
Yes.
His C-3PO is batting 1,000 with the one-liners. Just perfect timing. Everything. It's just so good. I was also really surprised how well Yoda's death scene worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
He has that little bit of sass and his total attitude about death. This is actually, I think, if you have small kids and learning about the concept of death and its inevitability and kind of embracing it, not necessarily being scared of it, it works really well towards that. Plus, on top of that, you get Luke's revelations about everything. For a pretty short scene, it altogether just runs very smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
I did notice also this time, it's kind of funny to note, when Yoda dies, he takes his clothes with him, unlike Obi-Wan. So like when Obi-Wan died, it was the robes were left, but when Yoda dies, it's just his blanket. His robes disappear with him.
He's had more time to train.
Yes.
I guess.
Hey, I like this outfit. I am not losing it.
He's been wearing it for 700 years. In terms of unbearables, this one, not necessarily an unbearable for this movie. It's just kind of a weird post Return of the Jedi retcon that happens. Colleen, I know how much you love retcons.
Depends on what they are.
So when the droids are escaping the sail barge, R2 in perfect fashion pushes 3PO off and then just kind of drops off himself. And now we know that he's got the anti-grav boosters. Like, why does he not use those to get off of this ship?
I think I know.
Make sense.
It's broken.
Well, because the barge blows up. I think he just dives into the sand to try and avoid the explosion of the barge. That's my
Fine.
running theory, at least.
Like this is the only moment like in this trilogy that I can actually spot a moment where I'm like, no, if you have those boosters, this makes sense for you to use them here. Everywhere else, he doesn't really need them. He hasn't needed them up until this point, so it kind of makes sense. But alas, that's kind of the issue with retcons. And then the other thing I
Yeah.
noticed this time around, Colleen, you mentioned last time in The Empire Strikes Back opening crawl how they label Luke as the leader of the rebels, and that's a stretch if there ever was one.
Mhm.
When he's leaving, he says goodbye to Leia to go confront Vader, and he says, like, if I don't make it back, you're the Alliance's last hope. Bitch, she has been an integral part of this alliance since long before you got here. All right. She is like practically a leader. She was a princess and pretty much a general before you were a commander. So don't go lecturing her about what the Alliance needs.
Thanks, Luke. I got this. I outrank everyone here, basically.
Like, Luke, I get you're a Jedi Knight, you're a symbol, but like, there's a reason Leia has been doing this for as long as she has, because she's good at it. Like, come on.
Yep. Like, we'll see Mon Mothma later, and Leia is basically like her protege. So,
Yeah.
And Mon Mothma is the leader of the realm.
Yes.
It's like, Luke. Good try. Good try, buddy. Oh, man, that one is a good
always
one.
talking to us about the Bothans.
Oh, fucking pardon my French. Bothans. Oh, we're
Disney,
gonna
give
talk
us
about them
Rogue
in
2 with the
Legends.
Bothans. Give us
Yes,
Rogue
yes,
2
please.
of Bothans.
Yes.
If you're rehashing everything anyway, just do it, you cowards.
I could use some good Bothans, please. I've been reading way too much New Jedi Order. I need some good Bothans. Okay, back to this movie. Untouchable for me, Luke and Vader's lightsaber battle is super brutal and perfect. It's really well done. With Ian McDiarmid just chewing through the scenery in the background and goading them both. Like, he's basically prodding them both into killing each other. I was mesmerized this time around watching it. I love Leia getting to say, I know, back to Han. It's so perfect. And his smile there is great. Whoever said Harrison Ford was phoning in his performance, and I've seen this a lot, I disagree. He's super funny. He's still very charming.
I don't necessarily see it as phoning it in. I did notice a bit of a shift, though. He was, just like the rest of the movie, he was a little bit goofier with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll blame that on the carbonite. It did something
Yeah.
to his head. And of course, the most iconic line, "It's a trap." How have we not talked about that yet?
It's a trap.
So good. That line reading by Akbar is just killer.
Very true. All right. So now I do want to take a minute for us to discuss one item in this movie that is at the same time both an unbearable and an untouchable, all rolled into one. As we're going to talk about Princess Leia and the Gold Bikini. I will not lie, as a young boy, absolutely this worked on me 100% as intended. She looks hot.
She does look good. She looks good.
That being said, it absolutely serves no purpose other than to over-sexualize Carrie Fisher. None. There's no reason that she has to be a sex slave.
No reason whatsoever. Hated it when I was young and I hate it now. Gold Bikini can just go suck it. I can see, like, maybe if there was an accompanying scene of Harrison Ford being mostly naked for the ladies and the gentlemen who would appreciate that, that would have been nice. But it's basically just a scene drenched in misogyny and double standards. Carrie Fisher wrote about this in her memoir, The Princess Diarist, which I recommended before. Here's a little excerpt from that. Quote, "It was like, where am I in all of this? I have to stay with the slug with the big tongue, nearly naked," which was not a style choice for me. Wasn't my choice. When, and this is director George Lucas, showed me the outfit, I thought he was kidding. And it made me very nervous. I had to sit very straight because I couldn't have lines on my sides, like little creases. No creases of my body were allowed. So I had to sit very, very rigid straight. End quote. Not okay. The only consolation for being forced to wear that stupid outfit is that Leia became known as the Hutt Slayer after this by many people in the galaxy, and they admire her for it. They're like, you took down a Hutt, and not just any Hutt, Jabba. Like, there you go. Get it, Leia.
Carrie Fisher was always very, very candid about how ridiculous and stupid this thing was. I pulled this quote from an interview she did with Insider just a few years ago. We use it also in our episode of Bohemian Geek Studies on representation in Star Wars with Sabine Wren. So they ask her, how parents reacted to that whole deal. If they see a toy that shows her in the Gold Bikini, how are they supposed to explain that to her kids? Well, First of all, my one reaction about that is, why are you asking her that? Why not ask George Lucas about that? He's the one who came up with the fucking idea.
Exactly.
That is a question for him, not for her.
Mhm.
But her response is, tell them that a giant slug captured me and forced me to wear that stupid outfit. And then I killed him because I didn't like it. Then I took it off backstage.
I love
Brilliant.
Carrie Fisher's
Icon.
wit. She is amazing. She will always be an icon. And what a perfect way for her to talk about this.
Oh, I treasure her so much. She just
Yes.
was so good at self-deprecation, but yet still being a strong, badass woman about it. I
Mhm.
love it. I love everything about it.
All the love to Carrie Fisher.
Mhm.
Yes. All right. So now let's move into this film, kind of building on what came before it. How does it expand the universe? How does it build the franchise? And something that happens in all franchises as they get bigger, this one is no exception, is we start to get into the callbacks. Now, Star Wars in its current state is absolutely littered with self-references and callbacks. For several hours on that topic, check out our Bohemian Geek Studies coverage of The Mandalorian Season 2, where we have several hours dedicated to the Easter eggs, connections, and callbacks in those episodes. There are also just so many here. We mentioned it already. We have another Death Star. We are recycling that same kind of plot device from the beginning. They did that already. We talked a little bit earlier about how that makes sense, doesn't make sense, however you want to go with it. The opening also has that Star Destroyer flying straight overhead. In Empire Strikes Back, it was actually flying at the camera, but this one goes back to the original from A New Hope. We have another Cantina band back on Tatooine again. When Luke first enters Jabba's palace, he's got a very Vader-esque silhouette, one that's very recognizable to us immediately. And then as they are leaving Tatooine, Han tells Luke he owes him one now, calling back to Empire Strikes Back after he rescues him from the Wampa. He's like, that's 2 you owe me, Junior. We get what I would consider to be kind of a double callback. Colleen, you mentioned the inverse now, I love you, I know, with Han and Leia. And then she's got the blaster in her lap, very similar to what Han did to Greedo. And we get some serious growth from C-3PO, who said in the first movie he's not very good at telling stories, but it is his story in the Ewok village where he is actually telling the story of the last couple of movies that gets them to be part of the tribe, which is also another small reference to George Lucas's original concept for the series, where in his mind, this whole story was being told somewhere in the future by R2-D2.
Love
I
that.
love that detail. Yeah, R2, of course, would be telling the story.
Making himself look great.
You know, jazzing it up, making things sound great. I absolutely love how much they build up Luke across this series. And Return to the Jedi, you really just get to see the culmination of Luke's arc. He goes from that whiny farm boy who just wants to go in town to get some power converters, and now he's out here, you know, saving the galaxy along with his friends. Not saying that he's the only one doing it. It's amazing. Yeah, oh yeah, big part, but you gotta share the love. But I love his growth as a Jedi and as a leader. I think what's a fun little callback is, so when he gets shot in the hand at the beginning on the cantina, on the barge, he's got, you know, the hole in his hand, he covers it up with the glove. And then when he's having that vicious duel with Vader and he's just wailing his lightsaber down on Vader's hand and he cuts it off and he sees the circuits in Vader's hand and he looks at his own, thinking about his own circuits. And it calls back in my mind to the scene in Empire when he has the cave vision and he cuts off Vader's helmet and his own face is there underneath. And so seeing him grow and realize, you know, like there's always been a little bit of darkness in Luke. Like when he finds Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, and that look on his face is one of revenge. So we've always known there's a little bit of darkness in Luke, and he is wailing on Vader in that scene, and he's ready to give in. And then he sees that and he pulls himself back. And I don't think Farm Boy Luke could have done that. Only a Luke who's gone through everything that he's gone through, all the emotions and the trials that he's gone through. He has built himself up to that moment. So seeing him just being able to say, no, I'm a Jedi like my father before me, throw that lightsaber away. Amazing.
Not the
growth.
smartest choice. Let's be honest about that.
Not the smartest choice.
Throw the lightsaber to the side. Like you could have just put it back on your belt.
Right? Not a smart choice.
Obi-Wan's like, no.
Like, don't do that. But he believed in his father, and he really believed in the Force in that moment, and it's amazing. You know, other than that, we don't really see much expansion of the Force other than Palpatine's Force lightning, which was sorry for this pun. Absolutely shocking when I saw it. What I do like seeing, though, I love a pun. What I do love seeing, though, is that Luke utilizes techniques that both Obi-Wan and Anakin used. So we see him using a mind trick on one of the Gamorrean guards and on Bib Fortuna. I was thinking of his name. And then he also chokes a Gamorrean, like his dad, like a little bit of that dark side that we were talking about. And then finally, we've known about the dark side, but hearing Palpatine elaborate on it and in that throne room scene is very fascinating. So I also realized we never get to hear the word Sith in the original trilogy.
No.
We do learn a good amount about the dark side, which is nice to set that stage for future revelations about them.
That's how you can tell what part of Legends you're in, is when they start using Sith instead of Dark Jedi. That's when you're like, oh, okay, Phantom Menace came out. I know when this was published now.
We figured it out now.
Yep, we know what the Sith are now. I would say Star Wars, it's all about the relationships. I do wish we'd gotten a little bit more of the Emperor. I think he could have been a stronger character that way. I like how they did it, like bits and pieces of him, and it's only a trilogy, so you only have so much time. But I wanted to see more of his relationship with Vader, like what that was all about.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get it in the prequels, but it could have been a little scarier. I do love him flexing. Every time he talks to Vader, he's like, my friend. Like, wow, you're such a dick.
until the end, where he's just like, yeah, Luke, just like your dad, you're mine.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, this is not a friendship whatsoever. And Palpatine has like no friends. Maybe Doriana is like kind of a friend, but he really has no friends. I thought this movie did a good job with the trio's relationships, though, kind of building off of the other two movies. They're not a love triangle anymore, even though Han kind of mistakes that they are there at the end.
Han
like,
is all of us in that scene.
Yeah,
all of us who are remembering the guests, and we're just like, wait, what's going on?
It's like, oh no. Oh well, I get the girl. That's fine.
Yes.
I also like Luke and Vader's dynamic. It's perfect. I love Vader's little pause that he takes when they're on Endor after he's just sent Luke off with the Stormtroopers. Like, he's already been hit by the, oh, this is my son bomb. Like, oh no, feelings. I remember those. I just love that little aside. Like, yes, this is the good direction that we need from this movie. And then we also get to see Coruscant for the first time. Author Timothy Zahn's galactic capital creation finally made it to the big screen for that quick celebration shot at the end.
Thank you, Timothy Zahn. What a guy, giving us so much to this universe.
Seriously. We'll talk more about that in a later episode, I know.
I do want to say real quick that Luke Vader scene on Endor, absolutely love it. I'm glad you brought it up. But it makes me laugh now, knowing everything we know in canon. Because just imagine Vader seeing like, oh, you have a new lightsaber. And inside he's like, oh, mine's not good enough anymore. He flicks on this green lightsaber. And he's like, you know, it had to kill him. Because like, I changed Ahsoka's lightsaber colors to blue. It should be blue. What are you doing, son? You know he was heated on the inside.
I'm wondering, have either of you guys watched any of the deleted scenes?
No,
probably like a long time ago. If they're on the
so
DVD
one of them, they're up on Disney Plus. They have several deleted scenes, and one of them actually was the original opening. You open on Tatooine. Luke is in a cave finishing construction on the lightsaber, and he ignites it for the first time, and he then sends R2-D2 off on their mission. I think they cut it because you maybe get more of a sense that Luke is still good despite the black and everything that he's wearing, because that's one of the things when he first shows up, we're actually not quite sure. He could have turned to the dark side. He's using force chokes, he's using mind tricks, he's manipulating people a lot more.
He's dressed all in black.
Yeah, but if you have a wide shot that shows his X-wing with the Falcon in the background and him sending off R2, maybe that doesn't land as well.
A little more mystery.
Yeah.
Now, a quick aside, we have to talk about the Cantina rescue real quick, or the Jabba's Palace rescue. What was the plan? Like, so they send Leia in with Chewie, and she's trying to sneak Han out in the middle of the night and gets captured. But then Luke shows up, but they send the droids first before Leia, saying that Luke's going to come to negotiate. So was Luke going to come and try and negotiate, even if Leia, like, got out with Han? I don't quite understand what was going on there.
I guess it's like a sleight of hand, like a misdirection, so that they're not really looking at Leia.
Gotcha. They're preparing for Luke instead, and she's like, "Oh,
Yes.
let me try and do that while they're preparing for the Jedi."
How does Chewbacca fit into this?
Muscle. They need
I
somebody
hope
to carry Han out of there.
He's
Leia
back,
can't
right, but he's
carry
back.
him.
He's back in the cells.
I hope
He was gonna go get it.
their next thing
Well,
was going to
Lando
go
was probably
immediately.
supposed to break him out, maybe.
Yes,
That's true.
that
That's
makes
probably why
sense.
Lando was there. Because Lando is like the final backup.
And he just didn't break his cover because he's like, all right, I can try and help them later.
I will say that, Daniel, bringing up a good point, it's like a 2-year gap between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And if this is what they came up with after 2 years, maybe not the best plan.
They were hitting the spotchka a little bit before this.
Would they have even done that? Would we have even gone back to Tatooine, though, if we mentioned this last time, if Harrison Ford didn't come back? Would they even bother with this, or would the entire first act of the movie just not happen?
I think we would have had an entirely different first act.
Or if he was dead. Like they got there and they couldn't revive him. Would be my only thing, maybe. But yeah, talk about a downer for a beginning.
Yeah, that would have been really dark.
That would have been really dark. Because when it comes to the rest of the plot, like the rebellion is just kind of ready to go. It's like, hey, there's a Death Star, we're attacking it.
Yeah.
That's all the explanation we get of that.
They're all
It
gathered
seems like
around
this is-
Phyllis. They're all ready.
We just got to grab our last guy for the plan, and then the crew's ready.
Yeah.
Good call, Daniel. Very good call.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on a little bit, Daniel, you mentioned a little bit of this earlier about what this film teaches us and builds our understanding of the Force. Now, just like the last movie really built up the Imperial Navy, the evil side, and then this one built up the Rebel fleet, the good side, the Force, we kind of get an inverse of that, where last time we learned a lot about the light side of the Force. And this one really starts to build our understanding of the dark side. We get that Force lightning in I'm also going to make the pun, in an electric performance. Ian McDermott.
Tearing up the set, Ian McDermott. Love to see it.
A+ casting.
Absolutely. And he was surprisingly young back when he played this decrepit old man. He was surprisingly young, which is why we were able to get him back for the prequels 20 years later.
Way to go, makeup department.
Thank goodness.
But we also get a lot more descriptions about the dark side drawing on anger and hatred. Give into it, as opposed to, Obi-Wan saying, bury it deep down. Bury your feelings.
Also healthy. Obi-Wan.
No, Palpatine, another word we don't get in this movie at all. It is just the Emperor. Talks a lot about what he has foreseen and how everything is unfolding to his design, indicating that he's really consciously using this prophetic abilities that were hinted at and teased before. So again, taking that one step further, temptation. Obi-Wan talking to Luke about how his compassion may ultimately be his undoing. Compassion, a nice little a prequel callback later on, I will say.
Yeah.
With Anakin talking about compassion and unconditional love. And we get a much stronger sense of those kind of psychic abilities rather than just kind of communicating with each other. Vader is like straight up reading Luke's thoughts. He figures out Leia, not just from some kind of an intuition or whatever. He is straight up reading Luke's mind.
Well, Luke's projecting it like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Luke, maybe just like bury that one.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna bury things,
one.
Luke, bury that. So what I like is, while it's not directly stated, they make some allusions to the disfiguring nature of the dark side. We see Palpatine just decrepit and corpse-like. He is gray and sallow, and it does not look great. And then, like we mentioned earlier, Luke looking at the mechanical hand, and it's a symbol of what he could become, like Vader, who's lost everything in the pursuit of the dark side. And then Palpatine is so sure of what the dark side has seen him. He's like, everything is going to my plan the way I have seen it. And he seems to really be like, I'm using the Force. I'm the one guiding this, instead of the Jedi, who seem to sit back and let the will of the Force guide them. So it makes me think Yoda says in the prequels that the dark side obscures things. And I wonder, did the dark side kind of punish Sheev a bit by letting him see things that weren't going to come to pass? Like, you dipped a little too far into the well there, buddy.
Well, we know the sun does not like to be controlled, so the dark side probably does not appreciate this.
It's the first hints, really, of the parasitic nature that the dark side has, which gets explored a lot in both Legends and canon.
Titan.
Very, very true. Luke
Oh.
showing up as that one candle, Colleen, to push back the dark.
Yes.
Stepping a little bit on our Revenge of the Sith discussion.
Oh man, yeah, that book, forever and always recommend. Getting back to a little light side here, we get to see that Force ghosts can communicate with each other, not just the living. They can actually like have little parties together. And are we wondering just how Anakin was able to become a Force ghost? Because seriously, y'all, that takes a lot of training for Obi-Wan and Yoda to be able to do it. George Lucas said on the Return of the Jedi commentary that Anakin kind of gets a little boost at the end there from Obi-Wan and Yoda, having forsaken the dark side and rejoined the light. Basically, he has to listen to his former masters, which is something he pretty much sucks at in the prequels and Clone Wars. Like, he would disregard rules and suggestions all the damn time. So in this very final phase of his life, in order to regain this semblance of himself, this Hayden Christensen Anakin, he has to listen. Obi-Wan finally is like, I can get you back. Like, I can help you. And this is great for Obi-Wan too, because he finally realizes that Anakin was still there. And I think he blamed himself for so long, thinking Anakin was gone. It's like, oh no, he's there. We can still do something about this.
I really like that. That's kind of beautiful.
I like it. Speaking about the Force ghosts communicating with each other, though, the way you put it that way now just makes me want to see the conversation that they do have. I want Anakin to like look at his hand, look at his legs, and look at Obi-Wan, and just see what happens.
So, okay, my roommate and I were talking about this. Anakin looks kind of awkward, a little out of place there, and you just know as soon as that party's over and no one's around, Anakin is going to get just chewed out by Yoda and Obi-Wan. Like, hey,
so hard.
We found the younglings, buddy. Like, you may have been redeemed, but we need to talk still.
Yeah, there's a lot of atonement for you to do in this nether regions. Like, for real.
You need to work on yourself.
Oh my gosh.
Oh gosh.
I love it. All right, next we're going to move into our recommendation sections. This is actually one of my favorite parts. I love helping people find new stuff to read and watch. Well, we're going to end today with our recommendations. This is going to be content you may like if you also enjoyed Return of the Jedi. And before I go into my Star Wars recs, I've been like totally mainlining 2 anime series since January, Attack on Titan and My Hero Academia. The series are very different in story and tone, but they're both epics with fantastic character development and very intricate plots. Attack on Titan is much more serious and it is gory, so be prepared for that. But it features that angsty main trio that we love, escalating danger, and some really killer plot twists. My Hero Academia is adorable. It's about teenagers with superpowers who are learning to become heroes. And just like Attack on Titan, there's a chosen one protagonist with the whole world basically on his shoulders, a wise older mentor, and an array of supporting characters who would look super comfy, like just chilling in the Star Wars universe. The creator, actually, Kohei Horikoshi, is a huge Star Wars fan, and he cleverly inserts Star Wars location names into the manga, and then they find their way into the anime.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So you'll see, like, a cloning facility is in the Camino Ward.
Oh,
like, well
nice.
done, Horikoshi. Well done. And then now moving into our Star Wars books for canon, the Alphabet Squadron series by Alexander Freed. Great. Absolutely wonderful. They focus on a squadron made up of different fighters. So you get, each one of them has a different fighter, like an A-wing, a B-wing, a U-wing, an X-wing, and a Y-wing. And then the pilots are also wildly dissimilar. It's really funny when they all have to interact together and work together. And then for Legends, we're going to go over the Heirs of the Empire trilogy in our later pod, going over kind of the pre-Disney era Star Wars stuff. But it is really the perfect companion piece to Return of the Jedi once you're done. And then I also haven't dived into these yet, but my Star Wars book pushers are really adamant that I read this series next. It's the X-Wing series. And this is set directly after the original trilogy and focuses on Wedge, my main dude Wedge, Antilles, and Rogue Squadron. So yes.
Nice.
Dip into those.
Nice. Well, I have a few recommendations this week. If you want a trilogy that just ends very well, just like I think this Star Wars original trilogy ends. I mean, I feel like everyone already knows this one at this point. If you haven't watched or read Lord of the Rings, you have to. I mean, what a fantastic trilogy. Like, if you're looking at trilogies that end great, Star Wars original trilogy, Lord of the Rings. Come on, let's go.
Yeah.
As I said last week, Avatar: The Last Airbender, again, 3 seasons, perfect trilogy. Love it. Now, if you're like me, the ending of this movie, while I love Return of the Jedi, the ending is very abrupt. It's like, okay, we blew up the Death Star and we all have a big party and it's over. It's like, okay, but what's going on? So if you're like me and want to know what's going on after, obviously The Mandalorian, set about 5-6 years after Return of the Jedi.
Yep.
So that is great. We get to see the fledgling New Republic. Also, I've got to shout out Battlefront 2 from 2017. This is a canon story following an Imperial officer who ends up defecting and joining the rebels. And it spans from, literally starts on the Battle of Endor. Like, she's on the forest moon of Endor. And it goes all the way into the First Order era. So we get a nice look at, how the First Order builds up, what it's like, how the Empire falls. And then also Star Wars Squadrons. So since you recommended Alphabet Squadron, which I'm very excited to read, I love anything to do with spaceships.
So good.
Squadrons is great because it's a canon spaceship story set in the Star Wars universe directly after Return of the Jedi. I want one of those posters so bad.
Right.
Also, our favorite space mom, Hera, is in Squadrons.
Yes.
So we love that.
She's in
Watch
Alphabet
Rebels.
Squadron as well.
Watch Rebels.
Watch Rebels.
Yes. So that's my recommendations for this week.
All right. So I'm going to start my recommendations off this week honoring the great Admiral Akbar, and I am going to recommend The Clone Wars Season 4, Episodes 1 through 3. This is the arc that takes place under the waters of Mon Cala. It's so cool to actually see the Mon Calamari in their element, fighting. It's got kind of a Aquaman type plot, a little Throne of Atlantis type thing going on. And it's just a really cool showcase for the Mon Calamari and a young Admiral Akbar.
Heck yeah.
Yes, he's a captain.
Yes. You've heard Colleen before on previous episodes mention Ray Sloan as part of the Empire. If you're interested in who that is, I very highly recommend the Aftermath trilogy by Chuck Wendig. It's a trilogy of novels that take place right after Return of the Jedi and cover the final actual days of the Empire and what happened to them leading up to the final Battle of Jakku, which leads us into what Rey's doing with all those Star Destroyers in Force Awakens.
Which also has some crossover with the Battlefront 2 storyline.
Very true.
Yeah, Disney has done a really good job with the end of Return of the Jedi, kind of making you realize just how dangerous the Empire still is. Like, it's not just all big celebration at the end of the movie and everything's fine. No.
I'm also going to recommend the 2 theatrically released Ewok movies. The Ewok Adventure Caravan of Courage, which came out in 1984, and Ewoks Battle for Endor in 1985. Now, I want to be clear. I am not recommending these because I've seen them and I think you should too. I am recommending them because I want someone out there to find a way to stream them and tell me about it because I want to watch them. And the only way I can find right now is to shell out like 40 or 50 bucks for the DVD on Amazon. And then it's probably a bootleg that doesn't work. And I'll also have to find a DVD player because I don't actually have one anymore. So find those, pressure Disney Plus into actually putting them on. I want to see these movies.
You've never seen them?
No, I've never seen them, and I've tried finding them. I've tried finding them
I didn't
online.
know these existed.
There are
We
2
had them recorded
Ewok
off of the Disney
movies.
Channel, I think. Yeah.
I
There
have
are
never
2.
known about these, and I think I'll try to find them, but in the back of my head, I'll still remember, should have been the Wookiees.
It should have.
Justice for Kashyyyk.
And then, as always, I recommend the novelization of the films. In this case, it was written by James Caan. So that is going to be it for us today. Thank you for joining us. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at YASWpod. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Stitcher, Apple, Spotify, whatever. Hit that subscribe button. Check out all the offerings from the Forgotten Entertainment family at ForgottenEntertainment.com. You can also find Colleen and I on the Bohemian Geek Studies podcast, where we are currently diving into Star Wars Rebels. You will also find Colleen's Star Wars book reviews on BohemianGeekStudies.com. Tune in next time when we will have a special bonus episode. That's right. Before we get into the prequels, we are going meta and discussing Star Wars fandom and the 2009 film Fanboys.
Woo!
Ooh, can't wait.
And that
It's going to
way.
be great. All right. Bye,
All right.
guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.